And it's my pleasure now to introduce the president of the basic class, Richard E. Craig of the Avon Schools Police Department. Take your seats. Thank you, Captain Rich. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Academy staff, distinguished guests, all of our family and friends that are joining us virtually via live stream to the graduation ceremony of ILEA Class 222. It's a distinct honor to stand here before you today as a representative of my brothers and sisters of this class. I would like to thank my classmates and Academy staff for this memorable opportunity. Today's commencement ceremony will mark as a transition in many of our lives, from life as a civilian to life as law enforcement officers. A commencement ceremony is intended to mark a beginning. It is derived from the Latin term inceptio, which means beginning. It started as a ceremony of initiation for new scholars into the Fellowship of University Teachers in medieval Europe to embark on a fresh start, in our case, the beginning of a career, to start the new life as a law enforcement officer, as inception to our lives in law enforcement, and that's why we're here today. But this ceremony is also intended to mark the end of a journey, to celebrate the road traveled to that inception. Oftentimes that road is encumbered with bumps, bruises, peaks, valleys, sweat, blood, and yes, sometimes tears. And not everyone who travels this road will make it to its destination. That road is sometimes long and unforgiving. And even though there have been many that have traveled this road before you, there is only a limited amount for which they can prepare you for the curves, the bumps, the holes are that lie ahead. Just as no two footprints are the same, no two journeys on this path are the same. It is not meant to be easy, and that is by design. It is designed to challenge and to assess. It is designed to eliminate self-pity and force one to reevaluate their own decisions in choosing this path. Then, and only then, will this road start to embrace one's journey and begin to provide all the needs that one may have along the path. The journey down this path for Class 222 hasn't been any different. As I mentioned, there isn't anyone that can truly prepare you for the bumps, the holes, the curves that lie ahead on this road, and this was never more true than it was for our class. Oftentimes, the more you think you know something is usually the time when you couldn't be farther from the truth. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 8, verse 2, the man that thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. Let that sink in for a second. In my years on this earth, that's one thing that I'm confident in knowing. It's that I don't know anything. We can assume, we can prepare, and we can predict, but none of us can confidently know what will happen when we walk out this door today. As a class, we were in the same room for the first time on November 3rd, 2020 for our entrance PT exam. We were to begin the academy just 1 week later. Now, I don't believe any of us could have known what 2020 had in store for us. We were scheduled to start the academy November 9th with the first 2 weeks of training being virtual, something that many employers, employees, universities, and students alike have had to do over the past year just in order to move forward. It may not be the most ideal or most successful avenue of working and learning, but it is a way. I don't think anyone will argue with me that it was definitely better than doing nothing or laying down. As a young country, we have always been a nation of fighters, and as a whole, we have always found a way. And in 2020, we did just that. We found a way. Just 2 days before we were to report to the academy in person, we were informed our training would be suspended indefinitely with no estimated date to resume. The abrupt stoppage definitely had a ripple effect that was felt in many police departments across the state. This meant that we all had to go back to our respective departments that Monday and attempt to continue with life and business as usual, even after preparing physically and mentally to be gone from home for the next 3 months. For me, it was difficult to go back to work that Monday. I had attended a law enforcement academy once already, but I was much younger, so it took me some time to prepare to go through it again. However, the sensible part of my mind knew that we all needed to stay safe. Finally, the email came from Director Horty in late December. We would reconvene virtually and report in person on Valentine's Day. This journey for Class 222 has been a road filled with bumps, bruises, and unexpected twists and turns. For us, this journey to today has been some 6 months long and has required the uncanny ability to adapt and overcome. The obstacles that Class 222 have faced have been great, but this group of young men and women have found a way to overcome every single time. I would say that we broke the mold, but there wasn't a mold for the challenges that we faced. There wasn't a roadmap or an instruction booklet on how to effectively train police officers during a pandemic. I would argue that the men and women in this room right now have endured more challenges than many classes before them. Not only from a training and physical standpoint, but from a personal standpoint as well. I mean, think about it. We were scheduled to graduate February 19th, and because of circumstances way beyond our control, we did not. Typically, a class here will get a class scheduled months in advance so you can plan life around it, as many of us did. However, just because the academy schedule changed did not mean that our personal schedules could. There were weddings planned, weddings canceled. Honeymoons paid for, honeymoons canceled. Deposits made for vacations, deposits lost for vacations, and so on. Sadly, there are a number of family members who have passed during this time, and as life would have it, there were at least 3 babies born while we were here. 2 of them being a set of twins, and both to new dads. Don't think for a moment that it isn't difficult to leave your wife to come back here after she's just given birth to your newborn. Because again, we can plan and we can predict, but we can never know. When I was preparing this speech for today, I did a lot of thinking. I reflected and I prayed. I thought of the personalities that are here and everything that we've gone through together, even before we met. There are many people in this room that I got to know weeks before we ever met in person. That's something that's different. The Academy Command staff didn't instruct us to get to know each other before we met in person. That's something that occurred organically. The command staff didn't instruct or suggest that a Facebook group be made so we could communicate with each other during the shutdown, or that we schedule Zoom study groups before tests, but yet it all happened. How? These things happen because there's strong leadership in this class. I believe that every officer in this class recognized the need to achieve a common goal. I assure you there are leaders in this room right now, from Kendallville, Indiana to Switzerland County and all points in between. Some of the future chiefs, sheriffs, and possibly executive directors are sitting in this room right now. Believe me when I tell you our time in this building may have been short, but our achievements have been great. This makes me full of promise for the future of law enforcement. There is nothing on this earth that I'd rather be doing as a career. I truly thank God every day I get to put this uniform on. And God forbid something happen where I'm not able to be in law enforcement anymore. I will forever be grateful I've had the time to do something that I truly love. And this is the only job that many of us have ever wanted since we were young children. I didn't start a career in law enforcement until I was 32. I'm 43 now. And it wasn't because of a lack of trying, I promise you that. I still had an unwavering love and passion for this profession when I was in my 20s, and it was all that I wanted. But the good Lord had different plans for me, and looking back, I'm so very grateful for that. Even though at the time I was upset, disgruntled, and discouraged. I'd spent 12 months in a hiring process, received a conditional offer of hire. Mentally, I was already in the academy. But they changed the number of officers they could hire, and I didn't make the cut. I vowed to never apply again. I couldn't take the disappointment. Luckily, I married a woman that was much smarter than me, and she encouraged me to try again a few years later, and I did, and I was hired by the Marion County Sheriff's Office. I tell you this story because many of you sitting here today, I never want you to take this job for granted. Many of you have been called to do this job. But remember, there are people out there like I was in my 20s. They've been called to do this job as well, but the right opportunity hasn't presented itself yet, or whatever the case may be. There's always someone else that wants it more. I vividly remember judging every officer I would see, looking at officers whose uniform looked bad, faded, or wrinkled, or an officer with a bad attitude, and I just knew if I ever had the opportunity to do this job, I would show that uniform the respect it deserved, and I would stay squared away. I mean, think about it for a second with me. How do we expect the public to respect this uniform if we ourselves don't show it enough respect to keep the sleeves creased and the pant legs creased, the buttons polished and the boots shine. We have to show some respect to get some respect. But if you ever do get to a point where you take this job for granted, then it may be time to do something else. Reevaluate yourself. There is zero shame in that. But to have the honor and the privilege to have been chosen to serve your community as a law enforcement officer is a very unique and special experience. To be here today with you right now is very special. However, I can't think of a few other professions where the responsibility is so great. Today, think about this. Today, the great state of Indiana is saying that their trust in you is so great that they will certify you with the power and authority to take away someone's freedom. If that doesn't give you chills, it should. But remember, to he who much is given, much is expected. And becoming a police officer in the year of 2021 is not the same as it was when I started 10 years ago. It's changed tremendously. It's changed from this same time last year. I've seen it firsthand. Every time I see a negative story about a police officer, it hurts my heart. It truly does. I take it personal, as all of us in this room should. This is our profession. This is what we do. And whether you like it or not, it becomes a part of who you are. The public calls us when they need help. We're always going to be the one that's supposed to have the answer, regardless of the question or task. But who do we call when we need help? Because right now, our profession needs help. And no matter your religious or political views, I believe we all can agree that the house of the law enforcement profession is on fire. And each one of you are running to join those who are already inside. I asked my classmates today, don't run inside this burning house just to meet your demise. Make a vow today to do all you can to extinguish the flames. There's nobody that will help change the current perception of law enforcement in the United States besides law enforcement itself. And this means everyone. Do you think the public judges whether an officer went through Tier 1, Tier 2, whether they're a reserve or a jail deputy? Absolutely not. They see a gun and a badge. So this responsibility falls on us to fix. It doesn't matter how we got here. It matters how we proceed. So I beg of you, hold each other accountable. When one of us looks bad, we all look bad. Always do the right thing. It is up to us to repair our reputation because nobody else is going to do this for us. This is a call to action by all the good men and women that wear this uniform. Step up and step out. Actions speak louder than words. Take the time for proactive policing. Get out of your car. Talk to the neighbors. Take the time to shoot a basketball with kids in the park. You aren't just laying the foundation for building your own relationships. You're helping painting a much bigger picture. As much as it pains me when adults have negative comments or an outlook on law enforcement, it's nowhere near the pain I get when a child has a negative perception of police. I stand here before you today because a sheriff's deputy that walked into my house when I was about 5 years old. I remember it vividly. The shiny brass, the campaign hat, the shiny core frames, the duty leather that made a squeaking sound that only tight duty belts make when he walked. When he left that night, I knew then this was the job that I wanted. And as weird as it sounds, I wanted to make that squeaking sound when I walked. Police were now my new superheroes because he literally came to my rescue. And this isn't a story that I tell much, but I often think of that deputy and that 5-minute interaction that I had with him. We never even spoke that night. But those 5 minutes of him standing in my living room are being talked about some 38 years later. I'm literally standing here now because of that interaction. Do you think for one moment that he'd ever remember this night? Very unlikely. He'd probably forgotten about that run within days like we all do. And that's perfectly normal. But I want you to remember this. Get into the habit of conducting yourself with professionalism, honor, and integrity, and do it always. You truly never know whose life you could be impacting, especially if it's a young person. Be that superhero. Change someone's mind or ideas about police. engage in dialogue, educate, be open, answer questions. Young people are the future leaders of our nation. They're our future law enforcement officers. Our first president, George Washington, once said, a primary object should be the education of our youth in science of government, and in a republic, that the species of knowledge can be equally important, and what duty more pressing than communicating it to those who are to be the future guardians of the liberties of this country. We have to educate and remember we are always on display. Each of us have a part in this law enforcement profession. If we do better on how we interact, the negative narrative will become irrelevant. Actions will always speak louder than words. Very soon, we will stand up and we're going to walk out this door. I have made friends here that I'm sure to have the rest of my days. And as much as I enjoy seeing you all, I pray that today will be the final time there's a need for us to be in the same room together. I pray that when we leave, we will continue conditioning our minds and bodies as we have done here. Continue to train, continue to stay in the fight, and remember, CHST. Thank you, Director Horty, Deputy Director Foltz, Captain Bridge, Lieutenant A, and all of the Academy staff that has assisted us in getting here today. Thank you to the squad leaders and my Vice President for leading the way during our time here. I would like to thank Chief Laddie of the Avon Schools Police Department for your guidance and faith in me. Thank you to Clint Custer of the Kendallville PD for being an awesome roommate and awesome friend. But last but definitely not least, thank you to my wife and kids and to all the better halves of the families of our class, because the past 6 months has been less than easy on them. And I will leave you with a poem that a wise man once told us. I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will drop frozen dead from a bough without ever having felt sorry for itself. Never forget the pity bird. May God bless you, and may God bless Class 222.